Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey is based on one of the greatest stories ever written, Homer's ancient Greek epic, The Odyssey. The story follows Odysseus, the legendary king of Ithaca, and his dangerous journey home after the Trojan War. The film explores themes that Nolan often focuses on: time, memory, survival, sacrifice, destiny, and the human mind. Nearly 3,000 years ago, in the ancient world of Greece, a story was created that would become one of the greatest adventures ever told. A story filled with legendary heroes, powerful gods, terrifying monsters, and a journey that would test the limits of human courage. This story was called The Odyssey, and at the center of this legendary epic was a man named Odysseus. Odysseus was the king of Ithaca, a fearless warrior and one of the greatest minds of ancient Greece. While other warriors depended on strength and weapons, Odysseus depended on something even more powerful: his intelligence. His ability to create impossible strategies made him one of the most respected heroes of the ancient world. But his greatest achievement would come during the legendary war between Greece and Troy. For 10 long years, the Greek army fought against the mighty city of Troy. Troy was protected by enormous walls and seemed impossible to defeat. The Greek warriors had tried everything, but victory remained out of reach. Then Odysseus created a plan that would become one of the most famous strategies in history: a giant wooden horse. The Greeks built the enormous horse and pretended to leave the battlefield. They made the people of Troy believe it was a gift to their gods. But hidden inside the wooden structure were Greek soldiers waiting for the perfect moment. When night arrived, the soldiers came out of the horse and opened the gates of Troy. The Greek army returned and launched its final attack. After 10 years of war, Troy had fallen. The Greeks had won. And the brilliant mind behind their victory was Odysseus. But while the war was finally over, Odysseus had no idea that his greatest challenge was still waiting for him. Because returning home to Ithaca would become the most dangerous journey ever imagined. A journey filled with storms, monsters, gods, and impossible choices. This was only the beginning. The legendary journey of Odysseus was about to begin. After 10 years of war, the great city of Troy had finally fallen. The Greek warriors had achieved victory, and among them was the clever king of Ithaca, Odysseus. But while many heroes returned home quickly, Odysseus was about to begin a journey that would become more famous than the war itself. His destination was simple: home. The island kingdom of Ithaca, where his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus were waiting for him. Odysseus gathered his men, prepared his ships, and began sailing across the dangerous seas of the ancient world. At first, the journey seemed peaceful, but the ancient seas were not just filled with waves and storms. They were believed to be controlled by powerful gods who could change a man's fate. During his journey, Odysseus and his crew would encounter strange islands, mysterious creatures, and challenges that would test every bit of their courage. But the first danger came when they reached the land of the Lotus Eaters. After sailing for days, Odysseus and his men discovered a beautiful island. The people living there offered them a mysterious plant called the Lotus. Those who tasted it experienced a strange feeling of peace and happiness. But there was a terrible secret. The lotus made people forget their homes, their families, and their desire to return. Some of Odysseus's men ate the lotus and immediately forgot their mission. They no longer wanted to sail home. They wanted to stay on the island forever. But Odysseus understood the danger. He forced his men back onto the ships and ordered them to leave before they lost their memories completely. The journey continued, but the dangers ahead would be far greater. Soon, Odysseus and his men would face one of the most terrifying creatures in Greek mythology: a giant with one eye, the Cyclops Polyphemus. Polyphemus was the son of Poseidon, the powerful god of the sea. He was massive, incredibly strong, and had only one huge eye in the center of his forehead. Searching for food and supplies, Odysseus and his men entered Polyphemus's cave. Inside, they discovered a giant collection of sheep, cheese, and supplies. But before they could escape, Polyphemus returned. The Cyclops moved a massive stone in front of the cave entrance, trapping Odysseus and his crew inside. Then, the giant revealed his true nature. He grabbed 2 of Odysseus's men and ate them. The crew was terrified. They were trapped with a monster too powerful to defeat by force. But Odysseus knew that strength would not save them. He needed a plan. Odysseus offered Polyphemus a powerful wine from their ship. The Cyclops enjoyed the drink and asked Odysseus his name, but instead of telling the truth, Odysseus replied, "My name is Nobody." The giant laughed and continued drinking until he fell into a deep sleep. While Polyphemus slept, Odysseus and his men heated a wooden stake until it was burning hot. Then they drove it into the Cyclops' single eye. Polyphemus screamed in pain and called for help. The other Cyclopses outside asked, "Who is hurting you?" And Polyphemus shouted, "Nobody is hurting me!" Hearing this, the other Cyclopses left, believing nothing was wrong. Odysseus's clever trick had worked. The next morning, Polyphemus opened the cave entrance to release his sheep, but he carefully checked their backs to make sure the humans were not escaping. Odysseus tied his men underneath the sheep, allowing them to sneak out unnoticed. The plan succeeded. Odysseus and his remaining crew escaped the island, but before leaving, Odysseus made a mistake that would change his destiny forever. Filled with pride, Odysseus revealed his true name to Polyphemus. The Cyclops then prayed to his father, Poseidon, asking him to punish Odysseus. And from that moment, the god of the sea became Odysseus's greatest enemy. The journey home was about to become even more impossible. After escaping from the island of the Cyclops, Odysseus believed that the worst danger was behind him, but he was wrong, because his greatest enemy was no longer a monster, it was a god. Poseidon, the mighty ruler of the seas. Polyphemus, the Cyclops Odysseus had defeated, was not an ordinary creature. He was the son of Poseidon. After surviving countless storms, Odysseus reached the island of Aeolus, the ruler who controlled the winds. Seeing Odysseus's struggle, Aeolus decided to help him. He gave Odysseus a magical bag containing all the dangerous winds. Only the gentle wind that would carry them home was left outside. For the first time in years, Ithaca was finally within reach. But when Odysseus fell asleep, his crew became suspicious. They believed the bag contained treasure that Odysseus was hiding from them. Unable to resist curiosity, they opened the bag. Instantly, the trapped winds escaped. A powerful storm erupted and pushed the ships far away from home. The dream of returning to Ithaca disappeared once again. Odysseus realized that the gods had turned his journey into a test of survival. Every island brought a new danger, every choice had consequences, and every mile toward home came with another challenge. But Odysseus refused to give up, because no matter how powerful the enemies were, he still had one goal: to return to Ithaca. But the dangers ahead would become even more terrifying, because next, Odysseus and his men would enter the land of giants. After the disaster with the Bag of Winds, Odysseus and his exhausted crew continued their journey across the unknown seas. They had already faced storms, monsters, and the anger of a powerful god, but their greatest losses were still ahead. Their ships eventually reached a mysterious land known as Telepylos, the home of the terrifying Laestrygonians, a race of giant creatures unlike anything they had ever seen. At first, the island appeared peaceful. Odysseus sent some of his men to explore the land and search for help, but they soon discovered the horrifying truth. The people living there were not ordinary humans. They were enormous giants with incredible strength. When the giants saw the Greek sailors, they attacked without mercy. They grabbed huge rocks and threw them at the ships. The sea turned into chaos. Massive stones crashed through the wooden vessels. The Laestrygonians destroyed the Greek fleet, one ship after another. Odysseus watched helplessly as his companions were trapped in the deadly harbor. Realizing the danger, Odysseus acted quickly. His own ship had remained outside the harbor, giving him one chance to survive. He ordered his crew to cut the ropes and escape immediately. As they sailed away, they looked back and saw the destruction left behind. Almost the entire Greek fleet was gone, thousands of miles from home. Odysseus had lost countless men and nearly everything he had. The journey that began as a victory celebration after the Trojan War had become a fight for survival. Odysseus was no longer leading a great army. He was a man with only one ship and a small group of remaining followers. But even after losing so much, he refused to surrender, because somewhere beyond the endless sea, his home was still waiting. But the next island would bring a new kind of danger, a powerful sorceress, whose magic could change his men forever. After escaping the deadly land of the giants, Odysseus and his remaining crew continued their desperate journey home. Only one ship remained. The once powerful Greek fleet had been reduced to a small group of survivors, fighting against impossible odds. But the next challenge would not come from a monster or a storm. It would come from magic. The sailors arrived at an island called Aeolus, the home of a mysterious and powerful sorceress named Circe. Circe was not an ordinary woman. She possessed incredible knowledge of magic and could transform living creatures with her spells. Odysseus sent a group of his men to explore the island. They discovered a beautiful palace surrounded by wild animals that strangely behaved like humans. Inside the palace, Circe welcomed them and offered them food and drink. But hidden inside the drink was a powerful magical potion. The moment they drank it, Circe used her magic and transformed the sailors into pigs. They kept their human minds, but their bodies were changed forever. When Odysseus learned what happened, he prepared to rescue his men. On the way, the messenger god Hermes appeared and gave Odysseus a magical herb called moly, which protected him from Circe's spell. Odysseus entered Circe's palace and drank the potion she offered, but this time, the magic had no effect. Circe was shocked. She realized that Odysseus was not an ordinary man. Instead of fighting, Odysseus forced Circe to promise that she would never harm his men again. Circe restored the sailors back to their human forms. For the first time in a long time, Odysseus and his crew found safety. They stayed on Aeolus for an entire year. But Odysseus never forgot his true mission, to return home. Before leaving, Circe warned Odysseus that his journey was far from over. To discover his fate and find the path home, he would have to travel to a place no living man wanted to visit, the Underworld. A realm of darkness where he would meet the spirits of the dead. The journey of Odysseus was about to enter its darkest chapter. After leaving the island of Circe, Odysseus faced a journey unlike anything before. He had fought warriors, he had escaped monsters, he had survived the anger of gods. But now, he had to enter a place where no living man wanted to go. The Underworld, the land of the dead. Following Circe's instructions, Odysseus sailed to the edge of the world, where the boundary between the living and the dead was believed to exist. There, he performed a sacred ritual to summon the spirits of the fallen. One by one, the souls of the dead appeared before him. Among them were people from his past, warriors he had fought beside, and those who had lost their lives during his long journey. The most important spirit Odysseus came to meet was Tiresias, the legendary blind prophet. Tiresias revealed the truth about Odysseus's future. He warned him that the journey home would still be filled with danger. The anger of Poseidon would continue to follow him. But there was one warning more important than all others. If Odysseus and his men harmed the sacred cattle of the sun god, they would face complete destruction. During his time in the underworld, Odysseus also met famous heroes from the Trojan War. He saw Achilles, the greatest warrior of the Greeks. But instead of celebrating glory, Achilles revealed a painful truth. Even the greatest heroes would choose a simple life among the living over fame in the world of the dead. Odysseus also encountered the spirit of Agamemnon, the leader of the Greek army during the Trojan War. The dead reminded Odysseus that victory and glory always came with a price. After learning his fate, Odysseus returned from the underworld with knowledge that could save him. He now understood the challenges waiting ahead, but knowing the future did not make the journey easier, because the next obstacle would test his mind against one of the most dangerous forces in the sea, a voice so beautiful that no sailor could resist, the Sirens. After escaping the darkness of the underworld, Odysseus and his crew continued their dangerous journey toward Ithaca. But the warnings from the dead were still echoing in his mind. The road home was not getting easier. It was becoming more dangerous, and soon, Odysseus would face an enemy that did not attack with weapons, an enemy that attacked the human mind, the Sirens. The Sirens were mysterious creatures known for their unbelievably beautiful voices. They lived near dangerous waters where many ships had been destroyed. Their song was so powerful that sailors who heard it became unable to resist. They would leave their ships and sail toward the Sirens, only to meet their death. Odysseus knew that he could not avoid the Sirens forever, but he also wanted to hear their legendary song, so he created a clever plan. He ordered his men to fill their ears with beeswax so they could not hear the deadly voices. But Odysseus wanted to experience the song himself. He commanded his crew to tie him tightly to the ship's mast. As the ship passed the island, the Sirens began to sing. Their voices promised Odysseus knowledge, glory, and secrets about the world. They claimed they knew everything about heroes and their destinies. For a moment, even the great Odysseus was tempted. He begged his men to untie him and steer the ship toward them, but his crew followed his earlier command. They tightened the ropes and continued sailing. Slowly, the voices faded. The danger disappeared. Odysseus and his crew had survived the Sirens. Once again, his intelligence had saved his life. But the sea ahead still held one of the most terrifying choices of his entire journey. A path between two deadly threats. One side held a monster with 6 heads. The other held a deadly whirlpool that could swallow an entire ship. After surviving the deadly song of the Sirens, Odysseus and his crew continued sailing through the dangerous waters of the ancient world. But the next challenge would become one of the hardest decisions of his entire journey. Ahead of them were 2 terrifying dangers. One was a monster, the other was a force of nature, and there was no safe path between them. On one side lived Scylla, a terrifying sea monster hidden inside a dark cave. She had multiple heads with sharp teeth and waited above the waters, ready to attack passing sailors. On the other side was Charybdis, a deadly whirlpool that swallowed huge amounts of water and could destroy entire ships within seconds. Odysseus had to choose: face the monster or risk losing everyone to the sea. Before leaving Aeolus, Circe had warned Odysseus about this dangerous passage. She told him that there was no way to defeat both threats. The only choice was survival. But even knowing the danger ahead, Odysseus had to lead his men through. Odysseus chose the path near Scylla. He knew it was the only chance for some of his men to survive. As the ship passed through the narrow waters, Scylla attacked. The monster reached down and grabbed several sailors from the deck. Their cries echoed across the sea. Odysseus watched in horror as his crew was taken away, but he could do nothing. The ship escaped the deadly passage, but at a terrible cost. Odysseus had survived another impossible challenge, yet each victory came with more losses. His crew was becoming smaller, his journey was becoming darker, and the greatest test of their loyalty was still waiting. Because soon, they would reach an island where hunger would push them to break the one rule they were forbidden to break: the sacred animals of the sun god. After surviving the deadly passage of Scylla and Charybdis, Odysseus and his remaining crew continued their journey toward Ithaca. They had lost many companions, their strength was fading, but the hope of reaching home kept them moving forward. Soon, they arrived at a beautiful island called Thrinacia. However, this island carried a terrible warning. The island belonged to Helios, the powerful sun god. On this land lived his most precious animals: his sacred cattle. These animals were not ordinary. They were protected by the gods. Before leaving, the prophet Tiresias and the sorceress Circe had warned Odysseus, never harm the cattle of Helios. If they did, the consequences would be deadly. Odysseus wanted to leave immediately, but the gods sent terrible storms that prevented them from sailing. Days turned into weeks. The food supplies disappeared. The sailors became weak and desperate. Odysseus warned his men again and again. The cattle must not be touched, but hunger began to overcome their fear. While Odysseus was away praying, his exhausted crew made a terrible decision. They captured and killed the sacred cattle of Helios. They believed hunger was more dangerous than the anger of the gods, but they had made the one mistake they were forbidden to make. When Helios discovered what happened, he demanded justice. He called upon Zeus, the king of the gods. Zeus decided that the crew would pay for their actions. When Odysseus and his men finally left the island, Zeus sent a powerful storm. Lightning struck their ship. The vessel was destroyed. One by one, Odysseus's companions disappeared beneath the waves. The entire crew was gone. All of Odysseus's friends, all of his warriors lost because of one fatal mistake. Odysseus survived the destruction, but now he was completely alone. No army, no crew, no ships. Only a man fighting against the anger of the gods. The journey that began with hundreds of warriors had become the struggle of a single survivor. And his greatest challenge was still ahead, because soon, Odysseus would be trapped on a mysterious island for years, with a powerful immortal woman who refused to let him leave. After Zeus destroyed his ship and his entire crew was lost, Odysseus was left completely alone. He drifted across the endless sea, a survivor with nothing except his determination to return home. After days of struggling against the waves, he finally reached an unknown island, a place of incredible beauty, but one that would become his prison. The island was called Ogygia. It was the home of Calypso, a powerful nymph who lived away from the world. When she found Odysseus alone and exhausted, she saved his life. She offered him food, shelter, and protection. For the first time in years, Odysseus found peace. But there was a problem. Calypso did not want him to leave. Calypso promised Odysseus something no human could have: immortality. She told him he could stay with her forever and live like a god. He would never grow old. He would never suffer. He could have everything he wanted. But Odysseus wanted only one thing: to return home. For 7 long years, Odysseus remained on Ogygia. While the world moved forward, he sat by the shore, looking across the sea, dreaming of Ithaca. He missed his wife, Penelope. He missed his son, Telemachus. And he missed the life he had left behind. Even an immortal paradise could not replace home. Meanwhile, the goddess Athena, who admired Odysseus's wisdom and courage, asked the gods to help him. She believed Odysseus had suffered enough. The gods finally decided that his journey should continue. They sent a message to Calypso. Odysseus had to be released. Although Calypso was heartbroken, she obeyed the will of the gods. She helped Odysseus build a raft and gave him supplies for his journey. After 7 years trapped on the island, Odysseus was finally free. He sailed once again toward Ithaca, but the sea god Poseidon had not forgotten him. The final journey home would be his most dangerous yet. After 7 long years trapped on the island of Ogygia, Odysseus finally received the chance he had been waiting for, the chance to go home. With help from Calypso, he built a small raft and prepared to cross the dangerous seas once again. This was not the journey of a king with a powerful fleet. It was the journey of a lone survivor, fighting for one final chance. But the sea god Poseidon still carried his anger. When Poseidon saw Odysseus sailing toward home, he unleashed a terrible storm. The ocean became violent. Huge waves destroyed the raft. The winds pushed Odysseus away from his destination. Once again, the hero who had survived countless dangers was fighting for his life in the middle of the sea. Exhausted and nearly defeated, Odysseus finally reached the land of the Phaeacians. There, he was discovered by Nausicaa, the daughter of King Alcinous. She helped the mysterious stranger and brought him to her kingdom. The Phaeacians welcomed Odysseus and listened as he told the incredible story of his 20-year journey. The Phaeacians finally agreed to help Odysseus return home. They placed him on a ship and carried him across the sea. After 20 years away, Odysseus finally reached Ithaca. But his journey was not completely finished, because while he was gone, his kingdom had changed. During Odysseus's absence, many powerful men had entered his palace. They believed he was dead. They wanted to marry Penelope and take control of Ithaca, but Penelope never stopped believing that her husband would return. With the help of Athena, Odysseus created a plan. He would not return as a king. He would return in disguise. After 2 decades of war and suffering, Odysseus was finally home. But before reclaiming his throne, he needed to discover who was loyal and who was his enemy. The greatest reveal in Greek mythology was about to happen. The bow of Odysseus would decide everything. After 20 years of war, suffering, and impossible challenges, Odysseus had finally returned to his homeland, the island kingdom of Ithaca. But the home he remembered was no longer the same. While Odysseus was away, many believed he would never return, and in his absence, strangers had taken control of his palace. For years, dozens of powerful men had surrounded Queen Penelope. They demanded that she choose a new husband, and tried to take Odysseus's throne. They wasted the kingdom's resources, celebrated inside his palace, and disrespected his family. But Penelope refused to give up hope. She believed that her husband was still alive. With the help of the goddess Athena, Odysseus entered Ithaca disguised as an old beggar. He wanted to see who remained loyal before revealing his true identity. Only a few people recognized the signs of the true king. Among them was his loyal servant Eumaeus, the keeper of his pigs. To delay the suitors, Penelope created a final challenge. She announced, "The man who could string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through a line of axe heads would become her husband." One by one, the strongest suitors tried, but none of them could even bend the powerful bow. The legendary weapon belonged only to its true owner. Then the old beggar stepped forward. The suitors laughed. They thought he was just a weak old man, but when Odysseus picked up the bow, everything changed. He easily pulled the string. He aimed the arrow and sent it perfectly through the axe heads. The impossible had happened. The true king of Ithaca had returned. The disguise was gone. The secret was revealed. Odysseus stood before the men who had stolen his home. With his son Telemachus beside him, the king of Ithaca was ready to take back his kingdom. The final battle of the Odyssey was about to begin. After 20 years of war, wandering, and suffering, Odysseus was finally standing inside his own palace. The man everyone believed was dead had returned. The beggar was gone. The disguise was gone. The true king of Ithaca had revealed himself. And now, the men who had destroyed his home would face justice. With his son Telemachus and a few loyal allies beside him, Odysseus prepared for the final confrontation. The doors of the palace were sealed. The suitors were trapped. At first, they did not believe the old beggar could be their greatest enemy, but they soon discovered the truth. They were facing the legendary warrior who had survived the Trojan War. Using his legendary bow, Odysseus began the fight. His arrows struck with perfect accuracy. The suitors, who had lived without fear for years, suddenly realized they had made a terrible mistake. They had insulted his family. They had taken his kingdom, and they had believed the true king would never return. For the first time, Odysseus and his son Telemachus fought together. Telemachus, who had grown up without his father, finally stood beside the hero he had only heard stories about. Together, they defended their home and defeated those who had taken control of Ithaca. After the battle ended, Ithaca was finally free. The palace that had been filled with arrogance and chaos was restored. The rightful king had returned. But one final challenge remained, a reunion that Odysseus had dreamed about for 20 years. The moment he had crossed oceans, survived monsters, and fought against the will of gods to achieve, he was finally going to see Penelope again. After 20 years of war, suffering, and endless battles, Odysseus had finally reclaimed his kingdom. The throne of Ithaca was his again. The enemies who had taken over his home were defeated, but there was still one person he needed to see. The person he had dreamed about throughout his entire journey, his wife, Penelope. When Odysseus entered the palace, Penelope did not immediately believe that the stranger before her was truly her husband. 20 years had passed. She needed proof. So Penelope created a final test. She ordered their wedding bed to be moved from their room, but Odysseus immediately reacted. He knew the secret of the bed. It could not be moved because he had built it himself from a living olive tree. Only the real Odysseus would know that. At that moment, Penelope finally knew the truth. The warrior who had fought in Troy, the man who survived monsters and storms, the husband she had waited for all these years, had finally returned. Odysseus and Penelope were reunited after 2 decades apart. Their love and loyalty had survived everything the world had thrown at them. A king, a warrior, a survivor, a man who crossed oceans, challenged monsters, and defied the will of gods. This was the incredible journey of Odysseus. This was the Odyssey.